The Custom House Tower is a marked location right on the waterfront in downtown Boston. Directly in front of the structure is a plaza of sorts. We see some park benches, some antique street lamps, and big bins still burning with fuel. But what's most conspicuous about this area is all the bodies lying right out front. We see the skeleton of a man and a woman towards the back near these benches, and then a pile of skeletons, including the remains of a protectron and a military service member. I'm not sure why in my game there were so many Institute pistols lying around. As you can see, I'm just now discovering this, so I had never been here, but I don't remember collecting so many Institute pistols in my previous games, so I'm just gonna chalk that up to being a fluke. Now these bodies are all piled before a big platform. On either side of the platform we see some big speakers, and on the platform we find 3 bodies. One man closest to the microphone, and then a man and a woman who had been sitting in these chairs. Directly behind them is an American flag. I get the impression that this may have been some government official who was giving a speech or a presentation to the people assembled here. He had a protectron and a military serviceman to guard him, which was likely necessary due to all of the rationing and curfews that had been going on in Boston before the bombs dropped. When we explored the Massachusetts State House, we learned that acting Governor Lieutenant Governor Graham initiated martial law across the city after he refused to resign at the end of his term. If I had to guess, my bet is that the skeleton of the man standing by the microphone is that of Lieutenant Governor Graham. He may have been giving a talk explaining why he had to place the city under martial law or why he was refusing to stand down as governor at the end of his term. To his right, the female skeleton may be that of Susan M., his human resources consultant, and the man on his left could be that of T. Daniels. He's the only other man who was mentioned in the Massachusetts State House terminal entries who remained on good terms with Governor Graham. Of course, I'm just speculating here. We don't really know who these people are, but I think this makes for a plausible scenario. The Custom House Tower still has a pre-war United States of America flag, and like many of the older buildings we find in Fallout 4, it has a real-world counterpart. Initially, the Custom House Tower was just the Custom House. It was a cross-shaped neoclassical building designed by Ami Burnham Young in 1837. The real-world version has 36 fluted Doric columns, and it was made from granite mined from Quincy. Back then, the downtown area of Boston was a lot smaller than it is today because the shore was much closer inland. In the middle of the 19th century, the city of Boston did some land reclamation to extend the bounds of downtown to make more land to build buildings upon. But this building was built long before they did that, which means that at the time of this building's construction, it was right on the shore. In fact, it was right at the end of what was called the Long Wharf. Ships moored at the Long Wharf could almost touch the eastern face of this building. Because it was constructed so close to the shore, it was built on top of 3,000 wooden piles driven through the earth, touching the bedrock. Now, of course, after the land reclamation, it is much further inland. The shore is a bit a ways away. It's called the Custom House because it was here that the government processed a lot of the paperwork associated with importing and exporting goods in and out of Boston. Hence its location right on the docks before the land reclamation 100 years later. Now, the tower was built later in 1849. After the tower was built, it stood 151 meters tall, 496 feet, making it the tallest building in Boston until 1964, when the Prudential Tower was built. Even though it was no longer close to the water, it continued to be used as a custom house until city custom officials moved to the Thompson P. O'Neill building in 1986. This structure then laid vacant for 14 years until it was eventually turned into a timeshare resort by Marriott, which it remains today. But of course, this is only in our universe. Who knows what happened to this structure in the Fallout universe after the divergence? Perhaps it continued to be used as a customs house right up until the bombs dropped, which may explain why we found a speech going on right in front of the building. Now, it is a clock tower. We find a clock at the very top, and in the real world, the clock started on noon, April 6, 1916. But because the clock's motor was too small, it didn't have enough power, the clock didn't work properly, and it gave the incorrect time through much of the 20th century until it's repaired by a mechanic. However, strangely enough, the clock we find in Fallout 4 is completely wrong. The clock in the front of the building is turned too far clockwise, with the number 9 at the top. Going around to the western side, we see the image completely reversed. The 9 is still at the top, but it's a mirror image, making it look like 11. The same is true for the 2 other sides. What a silly bug. How hard is it to twist the clock 3 numbers counterclockwise to have the 12 at the top? To enter the custom house tower, we go up these stairs, which you can get stuck on. I don't think they were made correctly, and open a white door. Inside, we find one of the most gruesome scenes in the game. I counted them. There are over 15 corpses here, but I'm a little confused. These corpses are still red with blood. We find puddles of blood on the floor around them, big shopping carts filled with super mutant meat bags, posts with more meat bags hanging from them dripping blood to the floor. At once, we get the impression that this is some sort of super mutant den, that the super mutants have been killing people and dragging them here to devour them. But taking a look at the biggest pile of skeletons, we see that many of these people are wearing pre-war clothing. We even find a pre-war military serviceman wearing an army uniform and a helmet. But if they were pre-war skeletons, they wouldn't be red with blood. The flesh and blood would have decomposed long ago. So how is it that super mutants have eaten pre-war people? Maybe this place was sealed so tightly over the past 200 years that the people who died inside after the bombs dropped didn't decompose. Maybe the place wasn't opened up until the super mutants discovered it after the Institute made them many years later. They burst inside, they see these corpses which to them appear fresh and start to devour them. Yes, I realize I'm stretching here, but otherwise I have a hard time explaining this. We see 2 large statues on the inside. These are just typical revolutionary bronzes. We find them in other places in Boston. I don't think these have any historical importance inside the real tower. And against the wall we see 2 doors, both of which are chained. This is a little bit baffling because remember the building is in a cross shape, but the interior we find here is one large rectangular room. We also don't see these doors on the back of the building, so the interior just doesn't make sense for this structure. As we leave, a scripted encounter occurs. This encounter is going to be different from time to time. In my game, I found a big group of gunners being attacked by children of Adam from the ruined roof of a nearby building. We can access the roof by going around to the western side of the building where we find a staircase leading up, where we can kill off any remaining children of Adam. I often find aggressive children of Adam here, which makes it one of the more reliable places to go to farm for gamma rounds and gamma guns. However, another time that I came here, I got attacked by Absalom. Absalom is a random encounter in the game. He's always hostile to you and everyone else, and he's extremely challenging. He levels with the Soul Survivor, but he always wears combat armor and has mid to high level weapons, which means that every time you find him, he's going to be stronger than you or at your level.
Damn it! Where'd you go? That's never happened.
But we don't get any story with him. He's just a tough, hardened wastelander who attacks people on sight. Right next to this spot, we find a unique item. There's a big pile of brick and rubble on a corner of a building right next to those benches near the Custom House Tower. Inside one of the windows, we find a revolutionary statue leaning out. It almost looks like it's just about to fall. If you bump it just a little bit, it does fall and the head rolls off. But we notice immediately behind this statue a big stack of hats, one of which is Captain Ironsides Hat. This is a unique lieutenant's hat that you can otherwise only get by completing the USS Constitution quest and siding with Captain Ironsides. I'm not sure why this hat is named Ironsides Hat. Perhaps they meant to name it a lieutenant's hat, because having 2 Ironsides hats in the game seems like a bit of an oversight to me. Now, just north of the Custom House Tower is a unique-looking park. It's an unmarked location, but it has these big distinctive arches covered in plants. While it's not a named location in the game, it does have a striking resemblance to Christopher Columbus Park, which is located in the same spot in real-world Boston. However, this park wasn't created until 1974, which is long after the divergence, and I think it's a bit of a coincidence to have two nearly identical parks occupying the same space in Boston in two different timelines. At any rate, the most significant thing we find here is a bunch of rad stags. This is a reliable place to go to find rad stag meat to make rad stag steaks, which increase carrying capacity. We find the skeleton of a woman in a wheelchair at the top of some steps looking out over the water. There's a big bottle of Buff out right next to her, and this park is pretty close to a military checkpoint on some barges at the northeastern tip of the waterfront. We find a little Zip parked here in the grass, no driver though, and a big pedestal in the middle surrounded by mute fruit plants. The statue has long since been removed, but it's been replaced with a big barrel filled with burning firewood. On the far northern end of this park, we find a very small playground, just one of those spaceship slides, and an old jungle gym covered in plants. And that is the full story of the Custom House Tower, Absalom, and Christopher Columbus Park. A shorter video today, but I had a 2-hour-long live show last night, and I simply ran out of time, so I'm gonna finish this on up and head to bed. But I hope you all enjoyed it. What are your thoughts on the Custom House Tower? Do you have the same interpretation that I do of the events happening outside? Do you think it's Lieutenant Governor Graham out there? And what about on the inside? How can you explain all of those bloodied skeletons wearing pre-war clothing? And did you find Captain Ironsides Hat sitting outside when you visited this place? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I publish a new Fallout video 6 days a week, so be sure to subscribe and to click that bell notification button. And if you like what I do and you want to support me in a more personal way, consider becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. But more than anything, I'm just so glad you're here watching this video with me today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning with a brand new video.